The Gulf South Conference is the premier football conference of Division II. It's the home of 11 football national championships and 5 Harlan Hill Trophy winners. Now, bringing you in-depth coverage and pinpoint analysis every week with the GSC Football Weekly Podcast, here are your hosts, Matt Zaleski and Mike Ezekiel.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome in. I guess we'll still call it the Gulf South Conference Weekly Podcast. We're only down to one team left in the GSC, and that is the UNA Lions. I am Matt Zaleski, alongside me, Mike Ezekiel, and we are coming to you live, or recorded at least, from the Fox Sports Show studio. Mike, what's going on, buddy?
Man, not a whole lot, Matt. Got to do a little bit of name dropping for your sake. Heard you had a really big interview yesterday on your show, and man, just to hear about that was really awesome. You should give me some insight on that. I would love to hear about it.
Well, it wasn't really an interview on my show. It was pre-recorded, and it really wasn't set up. You talk about stealing an interview. I hung out at Texas Roadhouse here locally in Florence, Alabama, until Jim Harbaugh left the table with a recruit from Florence High School, and I was able to get a few questions in and play that clip back. So that was a lot of fun. But you know what, Mike, and I'm not just saying this because it sounds like the right thing to say. I get to talk with UNA's coach Bobby Wallace every week, and to me that's just a special. I've had Will Hall from West Georgia. I haven't got to talk to a lot of the other coaches in the GSC, but I have so much respect for all these guys that do their jobs and really do it at a high level. Obviously, Jim Harbaugh is big time. There's no denying that. You look at his college success and his NFL success, but it was really cool, and thank you. But like I said, I enjoy talking to coaches at so many different levels. So many of them have so much great insight.
That's right, and it's not only is that a true comment, but a very respectable one as well. You know, and just knowing that what these coaches have to offer, the knowledge that they have. You know, Bobby Wallace every week, I get to talk to him as well. And, you know, it's just so great to hear his knowledge and just to hear from other guys. And you'll be surprised how many fascinating people you can meet at all levels of football, all levels of every sport. And just the people we come in contact with, whether it be media or non-media, it's a lot of fun to always go out and talk to people. But a pretty big name for you.
Yeah, no doubt about it, Mike. And I want to say this, too. There's one coach I got to talk to and spend a little bit of time with. And I've had him on my show before, and I've got to talk to him off the air. Right. And I think that this one coach I'm talking about is one of the sharpest guys I've spent time with. And you could tell he's a great fit as a head coach, and he does work with the Gulf South Conference. His name is Rick Rhodes, former Delta State coach, took them to the semifinals, and I think Rick is incredible, unbelievable knowledge, and just a great person on top of that. So, I've been very fortunate and blessed, and I know you have as well, Mike, to get to interact with a lot of wonderful people. But, buddy, we are down to the semifinals, and the one game we're going to do a full recap on is the UNA Lions. They did beat UNC Pembroke by the score of 41-17. They were down 17-10 in the second quarter, Mike. But after making a couple early mistakes, they really found their rhythm. On special teams, they made some big-time plays. Jacob Tucker continued his great run. And, oh, by the way, he has been named one of the 9 finalists.
Yes, it's an odd number, but 9 it is.
Yeah, one of the 9 finalists for the Harlan Hill Trophy Award. And this is for a guy that didn't even play most of the fourth quarters this year because of large UNA leads. But another great performance for him, 20 of 27. Extremely efficient, 284 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did have the 1 interception in there. Also was the leading rusher for the Lions, 16 carries for 87 yards, Mike. So another great performance for him, leading the way offensively, defensively. Gave up a little bit early, but then kind of really hunkered down a bit, got the stops they needed in the second half, shut Pembroke out, and cruised to a 24-point win.
Yeah, absolutely. 31 unanswered points. That's really big for UNA. Falling behind 17-10. Even with that given, Coach Wallace in the press conference mentioned pretty much what we were all thinking about. There was never really any doubt in the outcome, despite falling behind. Just the way that the players have been all year, such a complete team. Offensively, you hit on a lot of what Jacob Tucker, the receivers, the running game did, and that really helped them out in that game. But defensively stood out to me more because one of those touchdowns in the 17 points was a fumble. They got returned for a touchdown by UNC Pembroke really close to the goal line. So I guess with that given, the defense only gave up 7 points, and that was on a good pass in the first quarter. So impressive performance by the defense, especially to get 3 turnovers on interceptions and the 2 sacks, and to play extremely well throughout the game and to shut them out in that second half of the 31 unanswered.
With all due respect to UNC Pembroke, you got to be thinking they're like, look, man, I'll play anybody but North Alabama 4 years ago, they had a Harlan Hill finalist. They were a number 2 seed in the region back when there was only 6 teams, and UNA played them in the second round. And UNA went down there and beat them pretty handily. And then 2 years ago, UNA went down there again during a regular season with a third-string quarterback at that, where that guy now plays slot receiver in Jacob Thomas, and beat them by 3 touchdowns. Last year, they came up here, and I don't remember the final, but it was pretty dominant,
62-28,
something like that, yeah. And another big win, and then they beat them like this in the playoffs. And I don't know a lot about UNC Pembroke's program. I know it's a good program on the rise, but UNA has certainly had their number. They may have to tip their cap and say, hey, Daddy, how you doing?
And, I think they did. Coach Shane Richardson over there, who was the defensive coordinator when UNA did play them in 2013, very respectable guy. Very classy as well. Really gave a good tip to UNA and how good they're doing. But, they're building a program with a lot of experienced guys, a lot of juniors and seniors that have redshirted for a long time. And, that was a good team for them to play and for them to make it that far. UNA just probably a better team, more experienced team. Even though they do have experience, I think these players have been tested more at UNA playing in the Gulf South Conference. I think that played to their advantage. And just knowing how good this team is, not only with the transfers they have, but just with the players that have been in the program. Jacob Tucker's the epitome of what the players should be, and there's a lot of players like him on the team. So, well, that's kind of hard to say. Jacob's a different guy, but a lot of players like him, so to speak. And,
from a character standpoint.
Yes, from a character standpoint, exactly. And I think that's just really helped UNA this year. And going to the quarterfinals now, looking to make the semifinals for the first time since 2008, I believe, under Hudspeth. So that's a big deal for them, and I think the players realize that.
Mike, I picked UNA to finish 4th this year. I think you had them 2nd. And I just really thought this was a year they take a step back. And I may be jumping the gun here. I think maybe next year is because they are losing a lot of scholarship players. They'll be replacing those scholarship players with new guys, some transfers, some young guys.
Right.
But they're going to be replacing some really good players. But I said the same thing last year. And a lot of these guys that I think one thing I overlooked was there's a lot of guys that had been in the program on scholarship, but they were not necessarily starters. And so these guys were really they really bought their time, and they were ready for the opportunity, and they really stepped up. And I still look back at that West Georgia game and think that may have been a really turning point in their season. Now, they looked good beating West Alabama and Valdosta, who were good teams before that game anyway. But West Georgia still, in my opinion, outplayed UNA that day. But UNA showed a lot of resiliency and fought back and won that game. And I still believe West Georgia was the most talented team in the Gulf South Conference this year. I firmly believe that. But it does take more than talent to win. You've got to have the right mojo, the right chemistry. UNA seems to be putting all this together. These guys really play for each other. I do talk with Coach Wallace once a week on my morning show, and he talks about that often. So they found whatever that special sauce is, Mike.
Sauce, yeah.
The juice there.
That's so weird.
we had one of the reporters from Huntsville make that statement. I thought it was great.
Special sauce.
But it's something special with this team.
They got a formula for sure.
I'll tell you this though. We're going to dive into the matchup with North Greenville, who was able to beat Tuskegee and advance to the quarterfinals as well in this region. And then now UNA will play North Greenville with a chance to get to the semifinals. I do believe this is and I don't think this is usually the case, but this year I believe Super Region 2 is the weakest of the 4 regions by virtue of looking at the records and looking at some of these other teams and some tradition there in history. Yeah, I do think that is not taking away from UNA. That's not my point to make this statement, but I believe they've had I think Pembroke was not a great team. We saw what they did to North Greenville the first time. Now, that doesn't mean you'll do it to them the second time, but I saw what they did to them the first time. I asked Coach Wallace, I said, a lot of people say it's hard to beat a team twice in the same season, but I say if you beat them once, that means you got more confidence to beat them again. He said, well, Matt, I believe it's hard to beat a team one time in the season.
That's right.
So, but I do think, I think that they'll have the inside track this week over North Greenville. And I think when I look at some of these other schools, and we're going to kind of do a little bracket breakdown in just a moment, but you look at some of these other schools, California and Shepherd, the 1 and 3 seed, they're both undefeated.
Yeah.
You look over here in the bottom over here, Super Region 3, and you've got Northwest Missouri and Harding. Another 1-3 matchup. They're both undefeated. Right. You come over here to Ferris State in Grand Valley, a 1-2 matchup. Grand Valley's undefeated, and Ferris has 2 losses, I believe.
Yes.
So, that's really, really a strong strong batch of teams this year. I mean, the cream has truly risen to the top.
It really has. Super Region 1, 3, and 4. 3's always been the most solid, in my opinion. Super Region 4 is also really solid. Super Region 1 always seemed like the one that was kind of behind everybody else. And Super Region 2 is always solid as well. But, I got to agree with you. I do think Super Region 2 is probably the weakest right now, probably the most down. But, to go back to your point, I think it says more about UNA just to be leaps and bounds ahead of everybody.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. First, I think West Alabama was one of the 7 best teams. They didn't get in.
I agree.
From a talent standpoint, I think West Georgia was, but they didn't deserve to get in. They didn't do enough on the field. Newberry has a Harlan Hill finalist, too, this year. Well, he's one of the final 9. He didn't play in the playoffs due to, was it injury or I don't know why he didn't play, but the Newberry quarterback didn't play. That obviously hurt them. And then we know the Florida Tech quarterback didn't play either because he was suspended. If Newberry's quarterback was able to go, Florida Tech's quarterback wasn't suspended, is that the game instead of North Greenville Tuskegee? I feel like we probably have Florida Tech.
I
Newberry,
firmly believe that.
And then I think UNA's got a much tougher opponent this weekend. Once again, that's not to disrespect North Greenville. We may be talking next week about who North Greenville is playing in the semifinals. So I don't want to disrespect them, but I do think combined with not the strongest region this year and some key suspensions to some really good players, we know how good Cato is from Florida Tech because we've seen him. Without me seeing the Newberry quarterback much, I saw him last year in the first round, but to know he's a Harlan Hill, one of the final 9, that tells you enough. So without his services, they were not going to be the same team.
Yeah, Raleigh was a very good player for them, and again, he's in the final 9, as it is, final 9, kind of an odd number. But Florida Tech, I think they would have had a really good shot, would have been the favorite to beat North Greenville. But I will say this about North Greenville, even though they're probably the weakest of the 8 teams remaining, they're probably one of the hottest too, because I don't think they've lost since UNA. So, they've been on a good run right now. I think they're a 3 or 4 loss team. I think 3. So, barely oozing their way into the playoffs, but they've been hot. And I know UNA's not going to overlook that. And I know another thing, just looking at social media, North Greenville really believes in themselves and think that they can make it to the semifinals, saying UNA's on the clock. And, that's something to follow. You got to believe in yourself if you're going to win games. And North Greenville seems to hit a hot streak. Maybe they could play better against UNA this time. I still think UNA is clearly the favorite in this game. But again, I think UNA is going to get the win.
All right, Mike. North Greenville this weekend against UNA. One thing about North Greenville is the quarterback doesn't turn the ball over much. The guy has done a great job this season of not turning the football over. He did have an interception when he played UNA. But he also had an interception last week, even though he had some really, really good-looking stats last week, and they went over Tuskegee. But when he played UNA, he had 1 pick, and I think he's up to 4 or 5 total on the year. He doesn't turn the ball over. And you can ask any coach, and you don't have to be a coach. You could just be a regular Joe and understand this. Turnovers will kill you. You see teams with a lot of bad turnover margins. Most of the time, they don't come out victorious. Now, there's exceptions to all rules, but the guy doesn't turn the ball over much, and they have a strong offensive line. Coach Wallace told me that hey, this team has the best offensive line we played all year outside of Jacksonville State. And we know Jacksonville State is in their playoffs, and they're the number 2 team in the country in the FCS level of Division I football. So to be second to that unit is a strong statement for how good North Greenville's offensive line. They like to run kind of a counter trap play. It's kind of their bread and butter, and it's coming. But, sometimes something's coming. That don't mean you can stop it because when people run it right, I love the old saying. It's one of my favorite sayings. It's really an old fighting saying, but you can use it in any sport. Everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
That's right.
And so when somebody's running a good, strong counter trap, I know what's coming, but can I stop what's coming? And they're going to really be try to be effective with that. Their quarterback, they're very balanced. I mean, one thing I like about North Greenville, you see a lot of balance. Last week, 250 yards passing, over 200 yards rushing. A few more runs than passes, but a very balanced attack. They're going to present some issues there. They will yield some points. But I just think UNA's got the athletes that are really, really elite. And I think North Greenville's a fundamental, solid football team, Mike. I think because of North Alabama's athletes, because of just this chemistry they have, which I know they have it because I'm around some of these young men, and I talk with Coach Wallace often. I really think UNA actually, they don't just win. I think they cruise. Not as big as I thought they would cruise last week. I think I said, I don't know what I said, 48-14 or something. But I think, and they still won 41-17. It wasn't that far off. Right. I think this was a little closer. I don't think it's as high scoring as what we saw the first go around. The first go around, it was UNA 52, North Greenville 21. I'll say it's a little closer than that. I'll say 38-17.
And, I think we're kind of going opposite directions here of what we're thinking. And I'll explain why in a minute. But, yeah, I agree with you about North Greenville. I think you could argue they're probably the most balanced team in Super Region 2. Just the way they run their offense. Will Hunter's a very experienced quarterback. Got a run game of like 2 or 3 guys that can run the ball. Very experienced group. They had 3 guys rush for over 500 yards. That's impressive for 3 guys to do that. Not just 2, but 3. Got a really good standout receiver. I think his last name's Rooks. He gave a lot of teams problems. Had about 131 receiving yards last game. So that's going to be their main target. They're going to look to him a lot. And, this is a hot team. And I think UNA is aware of that. And one thing I've noticed, I went to practice for a little bit yesterday at UNA, and I got to see how the team looked. And just I saw a better focus than what I've heard about last week. I didn't get to go last week, but I heard that it was kind of an off week of practice. I guess the bye week maybe had a little bit to do with that. And maybe a little bit of that showed on the field. I don't know. But this week, I saw a lot of focus, especially yesterday. Maybe after the podcast, I may run over there and see what they're doing today. But I expect a big-time focus from UNA. North Greenville, one thing they do well is they jump out of the gate. I think they jumped out to a 28-0 lead against Tuskegee. So that's one thing they do well. They score early and often in the first quarter. I think they're going to try to do that, but I think UNA is really going to limit them. That bend but not break defense is really going to step up. I got to give Chris Willis credit for what he's done all year as the defensive coordinator. So as I pick this game, I like UNA to pull away in the second quarter and just continue to add on to their lead, and I like the defense to continue to step up. I'm going to say 48-16 UNA.
Oh, that's big.
I initially said 13, but I think, again, North Greenville's offense, you got to give them credit for driving down the field. But, again, I think UNA will stop them.
Did you go from 13 to 16?
I did. That's not a big jump, but, again, I think they will drive a little better. So maybe I should say that.
They'll tag on one more field goal.
But, again, I think I got to give Chris Willis credit. I think I haven't done that enough because I usually pick the other team to score higher, and they score a lot lower. And I think Coach Willis may rag me a little bit for that.
I think Blake Ferris, the defensive back coach, does a great job. He's got some really good talent back there. He's recruited much of that talent. He does a good job developing the talent in that back four. I really like what Blake Ferris has been able to do with his secondary over the years.
Great staff.
All right, buddy. I jumped you last week. I picked North Greenville. You picked Tuskegee. I have got a 1-game lead in our pick 'em, and it's coming down. But this week, we've got 4 games, and we're going to pick all of them. We're going to pick all 4 of them. Mike, we both picked North Alabama. On the other side, California beat IUP, and that's California for Pennsylvania, and Shepherd beat LIU Post. I think we're going to differ here. I like California at home in this game, even though that quarterback, I believe that's Jeff Ziemba,
yeah.
He was a Harlan Hill finalist last year. He's once again a Harlan Hill finalist. He could really be in the driver's seat to take that trophy home. He's a special player. They were runner-up last year to Northwest Missouri in the championship game. They're chomping at the bit to get back and try their hand at this thing one more time. So I think Shepherd's going to be ready for the challenge, but I think California at home will be the difference. I'm going with the California School from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, the California School from Pennsylvania has some playmakers. They have a great receiver. His last name's Brown, a great player. I think he's also in the Harlan Hill Finals. So that's going to be a key matchup. They got a good quarterback as well. But for me, Shepherd, I think they have more experience in those big games. They haven't lost a game since that championship game you alluded to earlier against Northwest Missouri State. I think they brought back a lot of their talent. They've been extremely impressive all year. That 40-21 win for them, I was not surprised at all. I will say this, though. The Massey spread. I got the spreads for you. I think you'll enjoy these. California is an 82% favorite. This is the one I highly disagree with the most. I think this is more of a 55-45 game.
What about UNA? What's the Massey spread there?
Yeah, 87-13 UNA. So yeah, and I'll read those as we go through every game, just so you can know. The over/under in this game is 63.5. I think they make it. Well, let me add up my scores here. I don't know, but I will pick this as a final. I like Shepherd to win this one. This is where we're going to differ here. 31-27. Shepherd, more experience in big games.
So you say slightly under.
Yeah, slightly under.
Okay, so your number's right around that. I don't want to predict a score here, Mike. I feel more comfortable just predicting the game.
Sure,
because
fine.
I haven't
That's
followed
fine.
them enough, but just some of the reading I've done here. All right, let's go down to Super Region 3, Northwest Missouri State and Harding. You said Shepherd hasn't lost a game since they lost to Northwest Missouri last year. Northwest Missouri hasn't lost a game since they beat Shepherd last year in the championship game.
They didn't lose that game, though, did they?
No, they didn't lose it, but they've been winning for a long time.
They got a streak for a long time.
And what I do know about this game, Mike, is Northwest Missouri plays great defense. They're 44-13 over a good, or 44-12 over a very good Emporia State team. Northwest Missouri, they like to throw the ball. They can run it, and they got a very physical front. They can really get after you. Harding, I think they're the best rushing team in the country. I think they run the ball better than anybody. So a little contrast in style, but I did pick Northwest Missouri State to be repeat champions. To be the champion, you got to beat the champion.
That's right.
Woo! So I'm going.
Nature boy.
I'm going Northwest Missouri State, and I think they pull away to another big win. They'll stop that run. They'll create points. Harding will get frustrated. They'll get out of their rhythm and have to throw it. I don't think they can. And for that reason, I think Northwest Missouri State cruises to another big win and back into another semifinal appearance.
Right, and these are the best two teams in total defense in the nation. I think Harding's the best run offense and run defense, so that's going to come into effect. I think, obviously, this will be their toughest test to date, as Northwest Missouri State is statistically the best team in the nation. This could be a defensive game. A lot of people are picking it that way. I think Northwest Missouri State's offense is just too dynamic. Zimmerman at quarterback, again, is another Harlan Hill finalist. I think he'll have a big game here, and I think Northwest Missouri pulls away to a big win over Harding. I think Harding gives them trouble early in the game, but I think Northwest Missouri pulls away, and then Harding's offense, since they've only thrown the ball less than 100 times this whole year, I don't think they'll have the firepower to catch up. Now, for them to win last week with the run game behind 10 to Sioux Falls, 27-24, to take that to overtime, I think that's impressive and says a lot about their offensive run game, that they can still catch up running the ball even when they are behind. But I think they'll get too far behind in this game, and I'm going to pick Northwest 38-21.
All right, Mike, let's move on. And by the way, what was the Massey percentage there?
Oh, you're not going to believe it. 92-8.
For Northwest?
Yes, 92%. Wow. Northwest Missouri.
I'll believe it. I think Northwest wins big. Grand Valley and Ferris State, Mike, and Grand Valley has been the class this year. They're number 2 behind only Northwest Missouri. Last year, Ferris State beat Grand Valley in the regular season, and Grand Valley upset them in the second round of the playoffs. And even Ferris State had James Vanderlaan, Jason
Vanderlaan.
I swear I butcher his name every time. Jason Vanderlaan. Okay, 2-time Harlan Hill Trophy winner, incredible player. I met the young man, incredible young man. And they lost that game. It was heartbreaking for him. This year, no Vanderlaan, and Grand Valley's now the home team. And Grand Valley beat Ferris in the regular season. Ferris pulls the upset. They do the role reversal. They show they can stop a high-powered offense. They held Colorado School of the Mines, who has a great offense, to only 17 last week, winning by 21. I look at this team similar to that Tennessee team in 1998. Peyton Manning was the quarterback and he was a standout quarterback for a few years, but they could never beat Florida. And then T. Martin comes in, and he wasn't as good as Peyton Manning, but they finally found a way to beat Florida. Well, Vanderlaan may be better than the current quarterback, but this is the year they find a way to beat Grand Valley when it matters most. They get the upset win. That's my big upset. They'll go to the semifinals as well.
Well, like you said, Matt, role reversal indeed. And with a steak dinner on the line, Grand Valley is the favorite here, 70% to 30%.
Well, that's closer. I mean, it's crazy how none of them are that close, but
Except
that's closer.
That's the closest.
That's the closest, and it's not that close.
It's not that
close. So that tells you they like the heavy favorites here.
But I'm like you. I think it maybe should be a little closer. I'm thinking more like 60-40, maybe not 70-30, maybe 65-35, but I don't know about 70-30. Even though Grand Valley did win 35-23 in the regular season, Reggie Bell's a good quarterback. He does replace Vanderlaan, but he did come from Division I.
Yeah, I love the metrics, but I'm not a metrics guy because I don't really study it and to know how they get those numbers. I love the numbers. So I couldn't really come up with a fair percentage here, but 70-30 is, I mean, you just get a little pie chart out and spin a wheel and say 30% is blue and 70 is red. I mean, you spin it and you go, or in this case, it'd be 70 blue because that's Grand Valley's colors and 30's red because that's Ferris. And you spin it, I mean, it's going to show up in the red a lot more. I mean, it's still a pretty big number, but it's still a distant number from some of the other heavy favorites. But it tells you how top-heavy Division II's been this year. The elite teams have been the elite teams.
And certainly has. Grand Valley's had an excellent year and really proved why they deserve to be where they are. And Marty Carter, best running back in the nation by far, in my opinion. He's also a Harlan Hill finalist. Can't say enough about what he's done all year, and that's their workhorse. He gets about 25 to 30 carries a game, but his one bad game, well, it wasn't too bad. He had 172 yards, but it was against Ferris. They found a way to shut him down. Here's another thing about that game. Ferris only scored one touchdown in 7 red zone appearances. But to say that they had 7 red zone appearances, it's a pretty good thing to say. So, I think they continue to drive the ball, and maybe this time they find a way to score. I like Ferris State too, Matt. Even though we got a steak dinner on the line, you're picking the upset. I got to pick the upset too, and this is an upset I picked early in the at the start of the playoffs.
So you're going to take Ferris?
Yes, and I'm sticking with it. I'm sticking with Ferris. I'm going to say 35-31, very close game.
Well, I tell you what, if Shepherd wins,
we're tied.
We're tied. If California wins, there's only 2 games. We'll have 2 semifinals and 1 final. And then you'd have to sweep me 3-0 to come back and win.
I'm picking against everybody.
So California Shepherd may ensure me a steak dinner. We'll see what happens there. We're excited about it. We don't know how they're going to reseed the teams. Speaking from the GSC point of view, and from a UNA point of view, Mike, I don't like North Alabama's chances to be at home the following week. I certainly hope they are, but Northwest Missouri, Harding, Grand Valley, Shepherd, California, 5 of the 6 teams are undefeated, and Ferris State's the only one that isn't. That's the only one I really see UNA being higher than. UNA did play Jacksonville State, who's a great Division I team, and lost, so that's not going to be held against them. But they had a game canceled, so they also have less games. It's going to be hard for me to find them in the top 2 spots. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope they are at home. But I have a feeling if they are able to get past North Greenville, you can expect to see them on the road next week.
And I think UNA is just happy to be in the playoffs, given the fact that you said they did have that game canceled. They fell below the games that they needed, the quota of games they needed. They did fall below that, so they're happy to be in the playoffs and got that waiver granted so they can be in the playoffs. Certainly deserve to be there. But like you said, I think you got a great point. I think there's probably 4 or 5 teams that could go ahead of UNA if they do advance to the semifinals out of the pool. Ferris State, I believe, if they win, they'll probably be the 4 seed, given that UNA does win. Now, if North Greenville wins, I think they're automatically the 4 seed.
Yeah, they'll definitely be the 4.
But I think if UNA gets in, I think what they need to root for here, if they do win, I think if Ferris State wins and possibly Shepherd winning, even though they are 11-0 and have played more games, they are a 3 seed. Maybe that gets taken into a factor here, and maybe UNA hosts Shepherd. But again, I think if California wins, I think if all the 1 seed wins, I think UNA's probably on the road.
There's 2 places I don't think UNA wants to go. And let me say that. Not UNA, because I don't think they're afraid to go anywhere. There's 2 places I don't think UNA needs to go if they want to make their way to Kansas City and play in the championship game. They don't need to go to Northwest Missouri, and they don't need to go to Grand Valley. I would not like their chances if they played, especially Northwest Missouri. I picked Northwest Missouri to win it. I want to be wrong. I want UNA to be the champs. I want to go to Kansas City and celebrate all night after they are the champs. But I don't necessarily believe, Mike. I got to – until you can beat Northwest Missouri, until somebody proves that to me, I'm not picking against them. I know how good this team is.
Yeah, and, I think Northwest Missouri, I don't think they're scared of any challenge. And, given what you just said, those are the 2 toughest places to play. And I think also you could throw Brawley in that mix, too. If you're looking at it from Grand Valley's perspective as well, you could flip the script. They probably don't want to go to Brawley.
Yeah.
Even though it is going to be snowing on that day probably in Grand Valley. So,
yeah, well.
I mean, that's a change of climate for both teams. Sure. Still, it's going to be tough to play in Brawley. Brawley's a tough place to play. Environment's always electric. Same thing in Grand Valley, same thing in Northwest.
And as much as I think Brawley is a great place to play. I don't think it's electric, and I'll tell you why. The fan base shows up. We show up. We were at number 5 in attendance last year. I don't know where we ranked this year. Out of 182 Division II schools, I mean, we're one of the best teams attendance. We're in the top 3%, 3.5%. But the fans that do show up to our games, they don't make noise. We have a quiet fan base, and so they don't get that loud. They do tend to get louder in the bigger games and bigger moments. Right. So to me, And I don't mean this disrespectful. I don't. I love UNA, but I don't find it an electric crowd. I find it being an active crowd as far as coming out and supporting. but I find we have a lot of our members in the crowd. I mean, I've sat before I got in the media, and I used to sit in the crowd. I'd get up and scream, and people look at me like I was nuts. I'm like, what are we at, a football game here or a church service? I mean, what are we doing here? You know? I mean, now I'm usually in the press box and things. I may step out for a little while, but it's a kind of it's not a overwhelming enthusiastic crowd. It's an active crowd. They love UNA. But we tend to show it in a more subtle way.
And maybe electric was the wrong word, but I still think Brawley's a tough place to play.
Yeah,
I will say
think
that.
so too.
And I think a lot of that's because of the team. I think they play a lot better at home.
Yeah. Well, we've got a great team, Mike. Well, it's only been 29 minutes, but, we're running out of teams here. You only got so much to say now.
We got one team to cover in the GSC, so.
And we're excited. We're excited at UNA. I'd be excited for any GSC team, but obviously I did graduate from UNA, so I'll always support the Lions. But, Mike, always a pleasure to see you, my man.
All right, Matt. Appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Our main man, Will Corey, he's in the back here, making sure everything's shot and going to be edited and taken care of. There's the thumbs up. Thank you so much for tuning in with us again this week, and we'll see you for the semifinals next week. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to the Gulf South Conference Football Weekly Podcast. Tune in next week for more GSC recaps, analysis, and predictions from your hosts, Matt Selesky and Mike Ezekiel.